Good evening, folks. Evening, Dave. How are you, mate?
Not bad, mate. You all right?
I'm not too bad. Yeah, listen, sorry for the slight delay. We had a few technical problems, just for a change.
Yeah. On my end. I know. Who's surprised?
So when you guys were firing the Reiki fucks into me, you can direct them at Mr. Lawnboy's post. It was nothing to do with me this time. I don't think I've actually ever done a single live stream where I need to get this right, where everything's going perfectly. There's always something, whether it's me kicking the USB. And as we know, if you unplug something from Windows and plug it back in again, it never just works. It never, ever works.
Yeah, pretty sure that's what killed my webcam. So.
So anyway, listen. Yeah, thanks for joining us tonight. It's the usual Friday waffle, but yeah. I guarantee you all probably heard the news. Mr. Sir Clive Sinclair passed away. Do we actually know when he died? Was it yesterday or was it this morning? Do we know?
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say possibly late last night, maybe early hours of the morning. The only reason I say this is I wasn't feeling the greatest yesterday.
Yeah.
So I mean I saw the evening news. It wasn't on there, and I went to bed about 8 o'clock, and then got up this morning at about 8 o'clock and it was in the newspaper, and that was the first I knew of it. So I can only assume, and also seeing from tributes on Facebook, that it was either very late last night or very, very early this morning.
I think you're actually right. In fact, I found out just when I was going to my bed, I noticed a post on a little messenger thing on Facebook to say he'd sadly died. I'm looking at Wikipedia here, and it does confirm the 16th of September 2021. So, yeah, my goodness, where do we start? Where do we start with such a guy? I mean,
I'll tell you what. Well, I will start, which annoyed me. What they wrote about him in the newspaper, because we all know about the C5 and stuff like that.
Yep.
But like all the big start of the newspaper, like he got a whole page, which was great. But the start, all the title was, Dottie, inventor who created the C5, and it's like, can we start with the man? Like, yeah, I know that didn't end great, but let's start with the man who brought computers to the masses in this country.
Mm-hmm. Interesting you say that, because I told my girlfriend this morning, I said, "Oh, I said, have you heard the news?" She goes, "What is it?" I says, "Sir Clive Sinclair's died." She went, "Oh, was that him that invented that little daft car?" I said, "Yeah, but he also invented the Spectrum." And yeah. I think that's there lieth the problem. Unless you're like one of us, or the people that are watching this tonight, you're into old games and that, and you no longer play old systems. He seems to be kind of known for that, which is a shame.
I also think there's a very British element in it, which is they like to highlight people's failures rather than, big up their successes. It's easier for that. I guess it's a better headline, rather than like, look what he did, ZX80, ZX81, the ZX Spectrum. But it's like, no, let's talk about the car. I think that's a British thing, surely.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. Interestingly, I was out for a cycle about a year ago, and I actually passed a guy. A guy went, sorry, when I say he passed me, he didn't go past me that way. We went towards each other. He was actually driving a C5, and apparently he's quite well known in Edinburgh. He still drives this little C5. But when you actually think about the C5, yeah, we know it was a commercial failure, and I mean, I don't know why it wasn't. I don't know why it never really took off. The fact that this guy invented an electric car, and I don't know when it said he did it. I don't know, when would it be, 1982, something like that?
I think it was... No, because he sold his business to Amstrad a year or so after, didn't he? And what was that, 86? I want to say 85, that's a guess.
Something like that. So, I mean, he built an electric car in 1985, and here we are now, we're all clamouring to think, shit, we need to get rid of all these gas-guzzling machines and invent an electric guitar. Bloody hell. And he probably invented that as well, and invent an electric car, and he was a way ahead of the curveball.
Yeah, he was.
There you go, 1985, you're absolutely right, Dave. 1985, it says there.
Didn't he try and do a bike maybe 10 or so years ago? Electric bike. Called the Z. I know we say Z, but I think the way they pronounced it was the Z something. Or
it was called, you've got an excellent memory, the Zyke.
That's it.
Imagine Nike, but with a Z instead of an N, a Zyke electric bike. That was in the 1990. Sinclair research consisted of Sinclair and 2 other employees, and its activities later concentrated on personal transport, including the Zyke electric bicycle. Yeah.
See, that predates all the electric, because it was a hybrid, wasn't it? Pedal and electric. So that also was ahead of the curve, because that predated all the mainstream, electric bikes. Because you used to see one advertised on TV, didn't you? Where he's casually going up the hill, overtaking someone on a regular pedal bike. But yeah, so that was, what's that? That's 30 odd years, 25 years, before those became mainstream.
The thing, I mean, it's what's sad for me is, I mean, he was I think to say he was slightly what's the word for it? Oh, I can never bloody remember. Like, eccentric was probably an understatement, but that's what makes people like him. You've got guys like Steve Jobs and all that. They're slightly wacky. I mean, I think you could probably class Sir Clive Sinclair as the nutty professor. Some of the things that he came up with, and yeah, they didn't all work. But
that's because these people, when it comes to their brain, they're like you said, they're wired different to everyone else. Otherwise, they'd be the same. And you've got to think certainly outside of the box to be these sort of people. Otherwise, because I don't know about you, but I don't just sit there suddenly wake up in the middle of the night and just go, "Oh my God, I've got it."
Well, I remember watching an interview with Steve Jobs, and what they said was what made him successful. And I know a lot of people don't like him because they think it's overpriced, but he knew what you and I wanted before you and I knew what we wanted. he would bring out something, you go, oh my God, I've got to buy that. And Sir Clive Sinclair was the same to a degree.
Yeah. I mean, he was all about affordability, wasn't he?
Aye.
People
Yeah.
should be able, everyone should be able to have something. That was the vision of his personal computers.
Yeah, I mean, if you think back to, I mean, I'm looking there. Yeah, he invented the pocket calculator in 1972.
Yeah.
And then he obviously did the Black Watch, which is released in 1975. I remember a guy at school had one of them, and I wanted one. I would love to buy one now, but I think they go for daft money. It was so iconic, the completely black screen, and you press it, and you get the little red kind of digits coming up. Beautiful, beautiful thing.
He also made mini TVs, like pocket TVs.
Yes, of course. And again, that, you know, but we keep repeating ourselves here. But he was coming out with things years before, you know, they really took off. And all right, yeah, the technology, I don't think the technology was really existed to make them a commercial success. But I mean, I think the things with the pocket TV, you could hardly get a picture, whatever. But the fact that he was actually producing prototypes, he was bringing out these things, and they actually did work. You know, I think if he had the money now, he could have, you know, I don't know, smashed it.
He certainly would be like you said, the concept of a green car. That was I think I did when I first started my YouTube channel like 10 years or so ago. I did a video on him, and I talked about that, and I said, you know what, if we mocked the C5, but you know, the concept of a green car, now everyone's got a Woody for it. So you know, there was something going on there that was clearly on the pulse.
Did you ever fancy getting yourself a C5 like now?
Do you know what? I would. I've had a look from time to time on eBay and stuff like that. And the only thing is, I live on a main road. I wouldn't last 13 seconds.
Well, so what was the actual? Why did it fail? Was it because of lack of any sort of
combination of bad marketing? Its performance didn't live up to what, you know, they kind of leaned on, because it had a washing machine engine. And the other thing is, loads of parent groups and stuff like that. Although what was 400, 500 pounds adjusted for inflation now from 1985, because that's what it was. So all these parent groups saying like, oh my God, it was so dangerous, because obviously the only thing that would let certain vehicles of a certain height know you were in front of them was that big flag on the back of the car. Do you remember Big Paul? But yeah, I think it was just a combination of things. But a few years later, possibly a bit bigger. I can still remember an episode of Blue Peter where they went to Elton John. Oh, house is too small, a descriptive term for where he lived. This is like early 80s. And I can't remember if it was Peter Duncan or someone else, but one of the presenters and Elton John, they did the interview by touring his estate in C5s. I really must see if it's on YouTube.
I'll need to Google that. Definitely. I need to check for that. Yeah. The ironic thing is, if somebody had owned a C5, they could quite happily drive about the centre of London, whereas people with fuel cars can't. I think they're almost effectively banned in London, and they're not. You got to pay big money, I think.
Big central zone and stuff like that. I mean, even then, I don't think you needed insurance for it. You didn't need to like any form of proficiency, which is weird, because even then you needed a cycle. Well, it wasn't legal, but we did them at school, didn't you? You did cycle proficiency and stuff like that. In many ways, though, if you think about it, if he kind of, you know, streamlined it a bit, made it ever so slightly different, but it's essentially that massive, you know, that electric scooter now that's so big that everyone in city centres are using.
There's Colin saying there, yeah, about £1,245 in today's money.
Whew. I wonder if it's like, and I don't mean this in a morbid manner, because you know he was like a legend to me, but I wonder if it's like many things now that he's you know, sadly passed away, those things, the good condition remaining ones, are going to go up quite considerably in value.
I think they probably will. There's Trevor saying, my old boss had a C5 when I worked in Eldon Square Shopping Centre. One Sunday he brought us in and let us drive it around the centre.
Nice, because you could pedal it as well to supplement the battery, because I don't think the battery was amazing, was it? Or...
Yeah. That's the thing. I think a lot of, like, obviously with the TV and that as well, and I think we've only really just caught up. The batteries for portable things up until fairly recently was always a killer. I think that was the real kind of killer with these things.
I do know what was very sad, because I watched a program on it very recently, actually, which is when it failed, the company that made the that was all they did, that made the motors for it, just went back. Like, it was no sweat off their nose. It just, well, all right, we'll just go back to making washing machines.
Yeah.
But then he did actually plan, because I can remember this back then, because he thought it was going to be, and I think this was on Blue Peter as well, separate from the Elton John one, where he did actually plan, because he thought it was going to be successful, a whole range of them. There was going to be the C5, the C10, which was apparently a multi-person carrying vehicle. So how on earth that would have, I wonder if there's any preliminary sketches out there or anything, because how on earth that would have worked for the battery technology then. But
I think it's fair to say he had tons and tons of ideas, but he probably just didn't have the financial backing. I mean, have you ever watched Micromen?
Yes, I absolutely love it.
Yeah,
I don't know if it still is, but anyone out there, it's worth a Google, because it was on YouTube in its entirety, and then if not, it's split into 3 parts, which is more than watchable. But yeah, it was definitely on YouTube a few years ago. I mean, some of it's to be taken with a grain of salt. It says that, doesn't it? This is like a docudrama rather than.
Aye. Although I know a few people who knew people who worked for him, and apparently was quite a bit of a fiery character in real life.
And then it always went for G&Ts afterwards to offset the mood. It was perfect casting, that movie.
Brilliant. What was the guy that played him? Alistair Pointless, whatever he does.
I forget his name, but he was that one part of that comedic duo, and he's got a game show, hasn't he?
Somebody will tell us. Alistair, whatever his name is.
Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. You know, one part of the RAF Airmen. Remember them?
No, can't say I do. Yeah, I'm being told here reliably it's still on YouTube in its full entirety.
Nice. I'm going to watch that after this.
I think I'll need to watch it. I've actually watched it quite a few times. I think it definitely needs slinging out. So I mean, obviously, you know, apart from non-gaming types, they think of Sir Clive Sinclair as just being the inventor of the failed car. But for us, it's always going to be about the computers. I mean, have a look. Was it the Z80? I think it was. That was his very first.
That was the white one.
Yep.
Two models, of course. One you built yourself, and one that you built, because that was the other way he get the price down even more for those who are a little bit more sort of tech savvy.
I'm just trying to see when it actually came out. Yeah, the Z80 came out in 1980, and as you say, I mean, it was. But you know, in 1980, computers were just. You know, there were thousands of pounds, or maybe not thousands. I think you could probably get. I think the Ataris were out, but I mean they were probably £600-700, and along came this little kit. How much was it? It was something like £49 or something. I think it was.
Yeah, and I know people like harp on about the way the screen refreshed, and you know, the horrible membrane keyboard, and the fact that it only had 1K. But like you said, it was 1980. You know, there was nothing like that in the home until then. Well,
he did. He allowed computers to go into the homes. I wouldn't say it was a computer for the masses, because I mean, 1980. I don't think I was really aware of computer at that point. But did you know of the Z80 at that point?
No, I didn't know of it until probably a few years into the ZX Spectrum life, and then when we started getting magazines, because obviously when the Spectrum came out, and we got ours in '82, I would have been 6, 7. So you know, my knowledge of anything was non-existent until we started getting the computer magazines, and then obviously a few years in, they would fill in the gaps. You know, when they would do like the timeline of, you know, computers up to the 48K and stuff like that. So yeah, I didn't know anything about it. It wasn't until the magazines, then obviously then until I was a proper adult, and like, you know, Tinternet came along, and you could just, you know, well, I wouldn't say Google, because was that around in when I first had the internet? I don't know, but you know what I mean. It was, you forget that as well. Like, if it wasn't for Google, this is how you fill in all your gaps in your information and stuff like that. But yeah, so I didn't know anything about the Z80, Z81 until, you know, years into the life of the Spectrum magazine, such as, you know, Sinclair User, Your Sinclair, and the legend that was Crash.
Dale Senior, he got his 4 weeks after launch. So, I mean, what does anybody know what was involved in actually building the thing? I mean, did it require you to put processor chips? I take it you didn't have to weld it, or not weld.
I don't think there was any soldering or anything.
Possibly just inserting chips. If anyone knows, oh yeah, Dale saying the school helped me build it. But yeah, I mean, it was I think that was probably the first kind of real. It was affordable. I mean, what I think Colin was saying there, it's £79 for the kit, and for an extra £29 you could buy it fully assembled. So that came out. The Z80 was out 1980, and then the ZX81. I'm not going to waste time looking for it. The ZX81 came out that maybe a couple of years later, possibly.
It had to be 81 because obviously the Spectrum was 82.
There you go. The ZX81 was launched at £49.95 in kit form. So I mean, it was even cheaper. I mean, 49 quid and £69.95 ready built. Where does it tell you? It doesn't matter. I can't even see when it came out. Probably a couple of years later. But I think the ZX81 is probably the sort of the first computer that the kind of I remember. I saw one. It was what the hell was it? Was it my English class? I don't know what it had to do with English, but my teacher said, "Oh, I'm going to give you a little treat," and he wheeled out the typical the big CRT on wheels. Nice. And you had the answer. We're going to get a video here. He wheeled out this TV and he brought out this little box and plugged it in. And I mean, the only thing it was doing, it would display a name on the screen for like 5 seconds, and you had to kind of type it in. So that was the first time I ever saw a ZX81.
Is it the ZX81 where they fixed a refresh on the screen? Because on the ZX80, what I know was every time you pressed the key, it made the screen flicker, didn't it?
I don't know. I know. Yeah, I think the ZX81. I don't think it had enough processing power to it had to update graphics when the screen was off or something. Was that kind of
that could be it? Yeah,
something. Yeah, I've never. I'm sure somebody will tell us.
But then with the 1K of memory, let's not forget. Have you ever seen 3D Monster Maze on it?
Apparently that's not 1K right enough, but to run on a ZX81 it is phenomenal. And even now, have you actually ever played the game? Have you played it in an emulator?
Ever? I have not. I want to. With the emulator I've got, so my Wii, it doesn't work. It doesn't work with that. But then isn't there? Someone's done an update for it for the 48K. I don't know, which feels to me a little bit like cheating because you wouldn't be taking it in this.
Yeah, somebody's confirming it was done in 16K, but it's a bloody absolutely phenomenal. It's a phenomenal game, but it really is. Yeah, the code ran. Sorry, I'll just bring that up on the screen. The code ran during the blank period between the bottom and the top of the screen. So does that mean technically you couldn't play a kind of an arcade game? Although I've seen Space Invaders on the ZX81.
I don't know. Or something else. I think I feel myself after this cast and tonight, in memory of the legend, watching a great many videos on everything he did.
But yeah, obviously the big one was the arrival of the mighty ZX Spectrum 16K. I think it came out originally, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it did, dear. When did it come out? In February 1982, Timex obtained a license to manufacture and market Sinclair's computers in the United States. So the ZX Spectrum was launched at £125 for the 16K, and then £175 for the 48K one. So what one did you have then, Dave? Was it
with the 48K? We got it in 82, but I'm pretty sure from what I remember my dad telling us, I don't know where. Well, actually, I guess he said he picked up a second-hand one. So I could guess back then when computers were so new, someone bought one for their kids or something, or bought one for themselves. And it was just a bit much, I guess. Because you wouldn't have had any previous experience of anything along those lines, would you, really, if you walked straight into the 48K? So and if you didn't have kids, then realistically, you probably weren't going to be using it for games.
Yeah. Was that?
But either way, I was very happy because we got a 48K Spectrum year of launch.
Wow. So was that a Christmas present or birthday present?
That was actually my dad just bought it. But it was for all three of us because there's obviously three of us and all boys. Sorry for my parents on that one. And I think his idea was this is going to help them with their schooling. They can learn programming. Oh my God, they can program games and stuff like that. Oh, I'm going to retire. And then it was like, nope, we just discovered games and that was it. So yeah, I think it was kind of and also we talked about maybe a couple of weeks before or so. It's part of that big drive with the BBC and the government. To get a computer in every school. Yeah, there was a BBC Micro B in my school, and yeah, we played that. And I think we also came home with just like talking about, oh my god, this thing's amazing, And we were driving a mouse around a maze to avoid a cat, but we were doing it by spelling words. And so I think he probably just thought, you know what, there might be something in this computer, like. And again, I think he thought he was helping us with our schooling and obviously, extracurriculum activities. But no. Once we realised that all you needed was his tape-to-tape Amstrad, there's an irony, his Amstrad tape-to-tape music centre, we were off and running.
So what games did you get with it? Did you get anything? I think you got a tape recorder, yeah.
No, you didn't get a tape recorder. Yeah, we had one of those. We got, because it was secondhand, we got a whole bunch of games with it. You got the Horizon tape with it, which had a picture of the rubber mat keyboard on the front, and that was like, and it came with a book, and that was like the tutorial tape with very basic games. There was a whole bunch of Sinclair games as well.
Scion was Scion, that was the
Scion was, I think, yeah. Then there was, what was it, Escape from the Doom Ship or something? I can't remember. There were a bunch of just text-only adventures. Were the Horus games branded as Sinclair? Because these games were branded with the Sinclair logo at the top, but that didn't necessarily mean they were Sinclair. We got Jetpack with it, which is actually a 16K game. Nice. One of the first games I ever played. And then we had a whole bunch of Boots C16s with games just taped onto them.
It's funny to think that very, very shortly after the Spectrum coming out, I think people sussed that you could copy games. So piracy was kind of up and running pretty much from the start, I think.
Yeah, and everything. Well, yeah, they came in our box. But and that was a funny thing as well. Everything they tried to do to circumvent it, such as that color code pad you got with Jet Set Willy. Do you remember that?
I do.
Where it was pointless because you could just copy it on grid paper like you got at school, because you wouldn't need like a colored pen. You would just write R for red, B for blue, Y for yellow. So you just draw a grid and write the things in. So that was pointless. Then you had lens lock, which was so good at protecting a game. We could never get the actual game to work. That was an original. I think it was Ace Combat. Could never get that to work with lens lock. Then they did like hyperdrive and stuff like that, which was still, you just fiddle around with the head alignment, wouldn't you, on the and
I think they just eventually gave up. They thought, well,
yeah. And then I think that's when they just start releasing big, massive, fat manuals with it, and it would say, go to page 13, go to line 12, go to word 7, and stuff like that. And they came down to the fact that in order for you to pirate this game, you'd have to have access to a photocopier and be able to photocopy a 150-page manual, and that just wasn't going to happen because it was 1982, and that would probably be more expensive than the game. So,
unless you're like me and you worked in an office and you had access to a photocopier.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, Oxygen Ship of Doom. Is that the game you're thinking of?
That's it, yeah, Ship of Doom. My brother Jason beats it. He loved that.
And there was, what was the other one? There was one with a picture of a hawk about to attack a bird or something. What the hell was that again? That's one you see all the time. The hell's it called? Somebody else will remember it. And you had Scion. What's it called? It came in a kind of cardboard box, and it had a hawk swooping down.
I can see the picture.
Survival. Thank you very much, Retrospective.
Then wasn't there another one which was an AutoCAD program, VU3D?
That's right. And I had like the wine glass with the kind of shadow. That was kind of cutting.
And then when you went into it, you just scratched your head and just went, I have no idea what any of this is.
There's a Mighty Maker chip. I think I've got about 5 copies of that in my cupboard. I don't know how I've managed to acquire them.
Hang on to them; they might be worth something now.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry. Just trying to think, because Ultimate were around very, very early. Because obviously we got Jetpack with it. Although Jetpack might have been 83, so maybe I've crossed memories or anything. But like, there were a whole bunch of really early Ultimate games, weren't there? Like, was Trans Am very early 80s?
Yeah, that would have been. Yep.
And
I mean, what do you think? I mean, what impact do you think the ZX81, or even the ZX81 ZX Spectrum actually had on the UK as far as video games.
Well, it created the bedroom programmer, didn't it? Arguably more than any other system. It created Rare. I mean, that in itself is a massive achievement. I think, yeah, I ultimately brought in gaming more than anything else. I mean, I know the Commodore was around in 1982, but what was the Commodore? 400 quid, 300 quid or something?
It was, I mean, yeah, I think it was about 300 when it very first came out. Then it came out about 200, but it was still always about, I don't know, a good 75 quid more expensive than the Spectrum.
So I think it's safe to say with the ZX Spectrum, bedroom programmers, more so than any other computer, because of how popular it was and how many units it sold, it essentially created British games industry to some degree. You could say that might sound a tad strong, but it certainly had a very, very big hand in there.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, I've been looking on Twitter all day, and the number of people. I mean, Jim Bagley, he was posting. He says it gave him his livelihood, and it provided an affordable tool for people to, tinkle away in their bedroom, and essentially, I'm quite sure, it absolutely kick-started the industry, and it's kind of led to what it's become now.
And of course, he was always upset about that fact, because he always wanted to be taken seriously as a business machine. And kind of resented the fact that it was such a popular games machine. And then you had the opposite with the BBC, where they was like, kind of upset about, when you compared it to the Spectrum, the contrasting size of the games markets available for it. I guess it always goes to show you just can't have everything you want. But I have to say, Sir Clive, if you are listening, I'm kind of happy that it was treated more so as a games machine, because it's clearly what made me fall in love with games.
I mean, it looked ridiculous when you see somebody like this businessman with shirt and his suit on, and he's sitting there pressing the wee keys. I mean, it didn't. I remember when I first saw a Spectrum. I mean, bear in mind, I had my C64 for probably maybe 6 months, and I was genuinely shocked. What is that? Well, that's my computer, and I'm like, look at it. It's just a tiny little slab of black with these rubber keys. I mean, to me, it was a toy. It looked like a toy, but it was. There was a guy on Bedrooms to Billions, and he said what made the Spectrum so successful was, like other systems like the Commodore 64, it had dedicated graphics chips and a dedicated sound chips, and it had this and it had that, and everything was all dedicated. With the Spectrum, you got a processor and memory, and the world was your oyster. There was really no limits, and that's what made, when you think of the originality, the games was just phenomenal.
Yeah, and then everything was a workaround. Like you said, every time you hit a wall or something, you just found a workaround.
Somebody would move it. I mean, it's mental when you look at the early games, even on like the Commodore 64. You think that back then you thought, well, that is what games look like, and then you fast forwarded even just a couple of years, and you look at something like I always think Night Lore is probably the piece de resistance of graphics on the Spectrum. It was just phenomenal looking.
That was something that the Commodore couldn't do for many years, because it had, like you said, had all these dedicated chips and stuff. Its actual processor wasn't fast enough to do the calculations needed, the math calculations for isometric 3D. That was one thing we could lord over the Commodore kids.
Apparently, I didn't actually realise that until fairly recently. When I say fairly recently, I mean maybe 10 years ago. But when you're an old bloke like me, 10 years ago is fairly recently. I didn't actually realise that the Spectrum was almost like twice as fast as the C64. And that's why it could do kind of vector graphics.
It was the Mega Drive to the NES, if you will, processor-wise.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. But I mean, there's no question the impact. I mean, I think when the Spectrum came along, I mean, in the early 80s, there was a lot, and we're probably going to touch on this when we do our next podcast. There was a lot of different machines coming out. It was almost like every other week.
Get a blatant plug in there, by the way, quickly.
There was almost like a new machine coming out every other week. I mean, when you think of the machines, what did we have? You had the Auric, you had the Dragon 32, you had the VIC 20, Atari 400, Atari 800. You had the Dragon 64. You had the Lynx.
Yeah, we were
You
the
had the
biggest manufacturer of computers in the world in the early 80s. People forget that. You always just assume Japan this, Japan that. But no, the biggest manufacturer of computers in the world in the early 80s was Britain. I'm not saying that all of them took off. I'm just saying, you know.
Well, actually, just where I live, Livingston, that was like the Silicon Glen of the UK. There were so many chip manufacturers. Now they're all gone, unfortunately now. But so what do you think? I mean, there were so many machines coming out, and why do you think the Spectrum sort of rose to the surface and eventually killed all opposition?
Accessibility, affordability, and the games. Because so many, anything that couldn't have as many games as that wouldn't compete. I mean, you've got the dinosaur analogy as well. When you've got that many machines competing for the home market, it's like there's too many. They're going to start becoming extinct. There's not enough resource to feed that many different separate machines, if you think about it. So the fact that the Spectrum had such a foot in the game industry, you know, because everyone programmed for it because it was so cheap, affordable. Bedroom programmers was clearly what, you know, made it outlast a whole bunch of the other ones. I remember a kid at school, primary school, had the Dragon 32. And yeah, just remember him being massively, I'm not saying there weren't any games on it, because there were, but being massively jealous and upset when he looked at, you know, like our Spectrum kids, and the fact that, and not just because there were so many games, like, and then you had budget, you had budget brands and labels and stuff like that. So it was affordable even before you worked out how to tape. You were never shy of software because there's so many companies, and like I said, budget ones. Like, I remember what a big deal Mastertronic was when they first came out.
That's the thing. I mean, it's, you know, I suppose you could say it's the same with the old video recorder. Apparently, Betamax was the better system. I don't know why it was better, but people said that Betamax was the better
quality,
system.
But you less length of tape. Can you tell we had one as a kid? I still defend it to this day. They were still used in the industry up to the year 2002, I believe.
Well, Betamax, really? What was the difference? You said Betamax was different because what?
Better quality. But the thing with that being better quality, that's why the VHS, you know, kicked his ass, was it was cheaper to build. Maybe you took a slight hit in quality, but it was cheaper to build, made it more affordable. And also, and I'm not saying this as a joke, but it was true, but also porn kicked in on the VHS. So obviously that gave it a helping hand, pun intended.
Well, I suppose Sam Fox's strip poker did come out in the Spectrum.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I remember the parents. This is funny, isn't it? Like, you know, going back to when Grand Theft Auto first came out, and then Grand Theft Auto 3 and stuff like that. But people were losing their shit over stuff like Sam Fox poker. It was like, shut up. Yeah. Who knew how to play poker when they were 9?
We quickly learned, didn't we?
Yeah.
But it's an interesting thing. I mean, I think we wouldn't be wrong if we said that the Spectrum was the most powerful home computer. I'm sure there was a lot of probably equally, if not, when I say better, more capable machines than the Spectrum. But I think, as quite a few people are saying there, it was the fact that it was so cheap, it was so affordable that it just, everybody was buying it, and people that didn't have a lot of money were buying it. And of course, they're going to, obviously, there was the software. You knew if you bought a Spectrum, you were going to have instant access to, you know, several thousand games. Does anybody know how many games came out in the Spectrum?
It's like, I don't know. I read somewhere, like, isn't there like 33,000 or something?
It wouldn't surprise me. I don't know. Doesn't say anything there. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure there were. I'm sure
that's got to be the biggest library ever, surely.
I don't know. I'm sure somebody will be able to tell us.
I wonder if it's got an entry in Guinness.
Oh, there we go. Retrospective is just obviously Googled, and he's saying 22,000.
Ah, there you go. Yeah, that sounds a bit more like it, but that's still absolutely insane, phenomenal number. I mean, what was it on the Mega Drive? 800 and something, 900. I know, obviously, you were dropping 30 quid, 35 quid a game on the Mega Drive, but still, 22,000. That's got to be a record somewhere.
It's phenomenal. So so the Spectrum came out. When did we say it was? 1982. What did we say it was? 1982.
Yeah.
And when was the sort of last commercial game released? I know
Last official game for it was Nigel Mansell's Racing, I think, which was 1992.
So what would that be? 10 years?
Yeah.
10 years.
Which, when you think about it, is very solid, because basically halfway through its life would be when all the consoles started kicking in, and it's still hung in there.
Well, there still are. I knew some people that still had the Spectrum. I'm sure you'd have been bloody gutted if you're loading up your Double Dragon in the Spectrum and then your mate's loading up Streets of Rage.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
but to give you an indication, like 92 was its final year of games, production games. But Ocean still dropped the money on the license for Terminator 2 and made a Spectrum game of Terminator 2 in 1991. So it must somewhat still been viable to make games for it.
Was that I take it that'd be by Ocean? I take it was it?
Yeah.
Terminator 2. I think it was. So I mean, it's 10 years when you think about it. I mean, 10 years for any machine is phenomenal. I mean, here we are. We live in the PlayStation 5 era, and already, even though you can't physically buy a PlayStation 5, they're already talking about bringing out a new one. I mean, what would you say is the average life expectancy of a modern machine compared to like the Spectrum?
7, 8 years. I think we were spoiled by the PlayStation 2 but that ran so long. But then you got Nintendo, which are the opposite side of the coin, which is even when they hit it out of the park, their machines generally only seem to have a 5-year lifespan. Obviously, the Switch is going to go out of that because it's phenomenally successful, but that's always annoyed me about Nintendo. And I've owned a fair few Nintendo consoles, but 5 years that's not long enough. So the 8th generation was what, 2013, and it's 21 now, possibly another year, maybe 2 on it. So they'll probably hit 10 years. Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, they sailed 10 years, didn't they? So yeah, 10 years would be, with the exception of Nintendo, 10 years would be basically your lifespan. I wonder if it comes down to the fact that the Spectrum started it. I would imagine the Commodore 64 had a very similar lifespan, if not pretty much identical.
I think the C64 that came out. I think that came out in 1982 as well, and I think it was, is it Monster and Mayhem Land or something? I think it was. I think that came out maybe in 94 or something like that. Maybe not quite as same as that, but you certainly got your money's worth. And obviously after 1995 or 90, when did the Spectrum kind of disappear?
92. 92 is its official last game.
Yeah, obviously people were starting to get modern machines, and and I was one of them. I got the Atari ST, and I couldn't wait to get rid of my 8-bit machine. And looking back now, you think, why did I do that? But if somebody says to you, do you want to keep your Spectrum or do you want this Mega Drive? You're obviously going to take the Mega Drive, and they probably got put into lofts for many years. I dare say there's probably a lot of Spectrums were probably flung out.
I wonder if that's though because we're collectors. We look at it with a collector's mindset now, which is you can never have too many machines because the history of it, they complement each other. But back then, like you said, A, storage, and B, if you play the Spectrum for 10 years and someone comes along and offers you a 16-bit machine, you're itching to ditch the Spectrum and move onwards and upwards. Yeah,
I think it's just the whole nostalgia, as you say. Looking back at these machines now, we've got the nostalgia, and that's why we think, well, why would you get rid of these? But going back at the time, you would gladly take them over kind of powerful machines. So what do you think if you were to try and come up with the quintessential? If somebody had never played a Spectrum before and they says, right, what 10 games should I play? What do you think?
Ooh, Chase HQ, right off the top of my head. That's that game's a phenomenal game for showing you what you can achieve with that box. Chase HQ, R-Type, Jetpack.
I would say Jetpack, yeah. And I would need to fling. I was never a fan of Night Lore. But I mean, do you like the game? Do you think it's a good game?
I think it's a good game. It kicks my ass. I've never completed it. But then I
Yeah.
kind of play it with rose-tinted memberberry goggles, which is I can remember the awe I was in when I was a kid when I play it as an adult. So it's probably more style over substance.
Aye, I mean, I watched, you did a video, I don't know, maybe about a year ago or something. I think you were playing Night Lore. And if you don't mind me saying, you were particularly pants at it. And I
I
mean,
am particularly pants. Do you know what? I'll wear that as a badge of honor.
it's a bloody tough game. I mean, you've got to. I would actually argue and say that it's not a very good game. I've said that about lots of games like Impossible Mission, the C64. Technically, it's an absolute masterpiece, but I wouldn't say. I would say that it's not a very good game, just because it's so difficult. But even looking at it now, it's just phenomenal when you.
Yeah.
And
Cobra, that would be another one. Balls hard, but another testament to just what people, was that Jopper?
Joffa Smith, yeah, he did that.
Yeah, that's testament to what you could get out of that box, like the scrolling, everything that going on at once, multiple layers of parallax, huge amounts of sprites on the screen at once. Nothing to do with the movie.
No, it wasn't. And then you had my mate and I. We thought, right, we'll get Cobra for each other's computers. So he got Cobra for the Spectrum, and I got it for the C64.
I've done a comparison video.
Oh my god, it's a bloody travesty in the C64.
Absolute night and day, isn't it, to the Spectrum? I was stunned. I didn't know what to expect. I literally went into that. Someone said when I was doing my comparison videos, someone said do a comparison of the Commodore version. So I deliberately never even fired it up until I did the first half of the video, which I knew what Cobra was like on the Spectrum, and fired up the Commodore. And for a minute, I was like, "What? Was this something else called Cobra?" If I go, wait, what? Terrible. Oh, one other game we forgot that you have to mention, which is absolute lore of ZX Spectrum games to own, would be RoboCop.
I've never played it in the Spectrum.
Oh, I demand a video, sir. A 128K video. It's fantastic. Ariston, the washing machine company in the 90s, nicked its music. Well, they had the rights, re-edited its music for their washing machine advert.
Is it pretty playable then, RoboCop? Because
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
I will need to. What was that? Sorry.
Batman the movie, 1989. Batman the movie. Essentially, it's like it's like RoboCop as well. But
there's Steve coming. Steve's a massive Spectrum fan. You can probably get a bonus point for recognising the game that his little avatar is.
Yeah. Also, there's this list of games. Yeah, absolutely bang on. All of them. Cyclone, fantastic. Death Chase, which is a 16K game, which is phenomenal. Scuba Dive, which is another game. If you play it and then play the Commodore 64 version, you're like.
Juggernaut. I'm not familiar with Juggernaut.
I'm not familiar with that one actually. Saberwolf, Manic Miner. Saberwolf's another. Oh, Valhalla! I forgot all about Valhalla.
Oh,
I had no idea what I was doing in that as a kid, but I loved it.
You're probably just as well. I was actually trying to play it last Sunday's stream. Give it a go. Do a video on it. Please do a video on it.
I just remember you literally kept dying, and it says you are now in Valhalla, but you could still control it, or something.
I couldn't figure it out at all. It was apparently sold as like an interactive movie, but give it a go. I demand. I'll do a video of RoboCop. You need to do one of Valhalla.
I'll get a ROM for it after this.
What's interesting, Death Chase. People always refer to it as 3D Death Chase, but I think its Sunday name is Death Chase.
It is Death Chase, but the word 3D, I believe, does show up on the box, but I don't think it's ever intended to be part of the title.
Aye, yeah, I think you're right. Have you played CRL F1?
I have not. No.
Well, you need to play that.
No, wait, I have. That's the management game, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes, I have played it. I can't get a ROM to work with it because I want to play it again.
Oh, really? I'll send you across one.
You literally, the only part of the game you actually control is once you've completed a season is upgrading your stats on your car, and you change the wheels, don't you, in the pits?
Yes.
But the rest of it, you just sit there, which you could argue is an incredibly accurate simulator of Formula One, because you just sit on the screen, just goes nothing, 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 and then you wait, nothing, nothing, nothing. So yeah, my brother had it. We used to play loads of it. Didn't they release a kind of pseudo follow-up that was motorbike based?
Oh, really? I need to check that, because back in the day, my mate Grant decided he had the Spectrum, I had the C64 on my disk drive. We said, why don't we swap computers for the weekend? So I got his Spectrum, he got my C64.
And then he left town.
No. Well, I loaded up his C90, and then I stumbled across CRL F1, and then that was it. I was up until about 4 o'clock in the morning playing this game. I was absolutely I was hooked. And then, as you say, you're just sitting watching, and you're, where
like
the
I
hell's
said, an incredibly accurate Formula One simulator. If you've ever actually watched it,
where's the yellow car? You see, zip, and then you get about a 10 second, and then you get bollocks! It's come up. Your thing had blown, but it's a fantastic game. I actually did a video, and the programmer actually commented on my video.
Nice.
Now I think, it was worked on by this guy and somebody else, and the other guy had actually passed away. But awesome game, absolutely awesome.
Plus CRL, it was CRL, Imagine, and Durrell had those lovely little clamshell cases. Do you remember? The black plastic ones, about that big, slightly bigger than a normal cassette, but not as big as the big boxes. But they were like bulletproof. They were you could use them.
Clamshell, were they? I can't.
You know where you popped it.
Oh, wait a minute. I like Ocean. I think you know the Ocean Imagine. You know the Imagine by Ocean.
Yeah.
Oh, they're lovely. Yeah, they were.
And then I got really disappointed when they all moved to the double dual cassette case. And I thought, no, go back to the clamshells. They were brilliant.
They were so breakable. Yeah.
I did a video, and I did it about. I think I did it last year when obviously all the football got cancelled because of the coof. And I did a video on Adidas Championship Football, and I wasn't derogatory or anything to the people who programmed it, but I ripped it to shreds. And a couple of weeks ago, the bloke who wrote it left a comment on the video, and he said, "It's a fair cop, Gov. I wrote this pile of tat." But then explained why it was like that, and went into the. I love it when stuff like that happens. Went into the fact that it was originally going to be a management game based on Liverpool FC, and then they came along and said no, it has to be a fully playable game. And he said that the reason many people disliked it, such as myself, was it got amazing reviews by Sinclair user, but they never reviewed the final version of the game.
Oh, right.
Which was quite common back then. Sinclair user lied a lot of times, most infamously for their review of the Konami themselves port of Nemesis, which was just basically they made a review up and it was just mocked up screenshots.
Yeah, I think Stuart Campbell, ex Amiga format or ex Amiga Power reviewer, he did a fantastic article in that, and just exactly what you said. They'd mocked up these kind of stills. You could even see
the initials of the bloke who mocked them up in the bottom right hand corner of each screenshot. That's how blatant it was. Because I knew my brother bought it and just went, "This is fucking awful." Sinclair user and Crash reviewed the proper versions, and I forget, but it was either one of them, but one of them actually had a slight little pop at Sinclair user, like. Something like,
Oh yeah, I think I remember.
Like, this is the version that everyone else got, or something like that, which is incomparable to the arcade. I mean, they were never going to be able to convert it anyway, but like, don't lie. Their version of Jailbreak was pants as well.
The arcade version of Jailbreak's bloody pants as well, honestly. So
balls hard, that's why.
Chucky Egg. So, what's the best version, BBC or Spectrum?
BBC, I can say that.
Oh, seriously? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting.
They're not night and day, but the BBC is the best, and that's not because I first got to play Chucky Egg at school. But no, it is slightly better. The thing is, I mean, I prefer the Spectrum. I absolutely do. But in the right hands, people could do some phenomenal things with the BBC.
I have not seen. I mean, Elite is a staggering game. I can't say I've seen any other game, and that's just because I've not physically seen it. I can't say I've seen any other game in the BBC that I'll go, wow. I mean, like Chase HQ on the Spectrum, Uridium on the C64. I can't say I've ever seen any game on the BBC that's kind of
The one thing
draw
that's
job.
never left me about the BBC that I will always remember above everything else, and I don't know what goes. Maybe it's because I grew up with the Spectrum and stuff like that, and I know the Commodore bread bin's pretty huge, but the BBC was just a brick. It was huge.
Colin's saying there, yeah, the BBC was the first computer that used. Oh no, sorry, that wasn't the one. The comments are coming in too quick. Wait a minute. The BBC's problem as a game machine is its memory. Why is that? It was 32. Was it 32K? I think it was.
Yeah, is it how they divide it up though, or something? Or
I have no idea. I'm not too sure. Yeah, Stephen's saying there some arcade conversions were great in the Beeb. There's a guy, Richard Broadhurst, he's actually been on my channel a few times. He has programmed a number of arcade conversions for the BBC, and they're just phenomenal, unbelievable. I think he actually uses the arcade code.
Nice.
Just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. So what? Obviously, getting back to the old Sir Clive Sinclair. I mean, so after we had the ZX, the 48K Spectrum, and then obviously I think they got into some financial difficulties.
Oh no! 48K Spectrum. Then there was the 48K Plus.
Oh, of course there were. Yeah.
Because my dad got that, but he bought the kit and he took the gubbins out the inside of the 48K rubber mat and put it in that. I love that machine. I do. But
what was the plus? Sorry, what was the difference between the plus?
Plastic keyboard. Had an actual reset on the side because people on the 48 on the rubber mat kept pulling the power out and plugging it back in, but essentially you could shag up the power unit on it doing that. So he actually physically put a reset button on the side. Had a plastic keyboard, but the problem we still never got a proper keyboard because if you looked at it from the side, the keys were all still perfectly in line with each other and flat, with a little circular bit in the middle. So it wasn't still like a proper. You would think like a, like an Amstrad or a Commodore keyboard. And then other than that, I don't know what if there are any there weren't any compatibilities issues with the first one. It would have been later ones. Then there was the Holy Grail, which I to this day still really, really, really want, but I imagine they're going to go up a lot more now, even though they're really expensive anyway. Was the 128K model, his last machine.
The Toast
Track. His last Spectrum, I should say. But then obviously there was the abysmal fail of the QL. Which he wanted to be his proper business machine, but then the story of that was when they released it and you needed extra memory plugged in as a dongle, I believe, on the first ones because they got it out so soon or so early in that tank. But that was the one that had the amazing advert where he goes for a jog and then he leaps all the other.
It's so realistic, isn't it?
Yeah, because why not? And he's got his little tighty whitey shorts on. But yeah, and that was I think that also had but did that also have pretty much the same keyboard design as the 48K Plus and the 128K? And then obviously because of the failure of the C5, that's when he sold to Amstrad. And it finally, even though I still prefer all the Spectrum machines, true Spectrum machines, but it finally got a proper keyboard.
So what was the reason for Dell's saying there the QL was a good idea but designed badly? Was it not released and it had bugs in it and then they had to do a recall or something like that?
It was just poorly built. I forget, I haven't seen that because I only know stuff from videos on it. I remember seeing it in magazines, but obviously just brief mentions and stuff because obviously it wasn't a games machine. I don't know if it could play games, but the way you had, I think it had a micro drive. Remember the micro drive? The single micro drive?
Colin's mentioned it. Can you see the comments in that? Yeah.
Yeah. Badly designed with cheap components, but his biggest downfall was micro drives. Yeah, because I think they actually said, he could probably back me up on this. I say that he clearly knows more about it than me, but didn't they recommend that every time you got a new piece of software on a micro drive to immediately make a backup of it, or even a couple of backups of it, because the way the micro drives work was it stretched the tape inside or something. So it gave it, a high speed loading device on it that was ultimately flawed, and if you didn't back up stuff, would destroy your actual original copies. And how you would do stuff on it, I don't know if it was like spreadsheets or stuff like that, or something, or its operating system was like archaic compared to what were the more, which he marketed it as being cheap, but how you would operate it was just archaic compared to the more expensive personal computer, business personal computers around at the time.
Yeah, like Colin's saying there that the micro drives are just so fragile. So again, I think it kind of goes back to the point I made earlier on. You had the ideas, but I just don't think you had the budget to really bring out a reliable system, which is a shame. I dare say somebody like Sir Clive Sinclair could have done, if he'd worked for Apple or whatever and had the money behind him, things could have been different. So what actually happened? Did Sinclair, did they go into liquidation, I think, was it? And,
I don't know if it went in. I think it wasn't far off or something, but like literally there were just tons and tons and tons of old unsold C5s. Like I said, the company that made, the factory that made them went back to making washing machines or washing machine motors. And I guess it destroyed his stock or something like that. And so the enemy that had been at the gates for a while came in and because he just saw it, and what he did was, which worked, because the 128 plus 2 was phenomenally popular. I mean, I was a Master System Mega Drive territory at this time, but still, we had a plus 3. I still played it because did a video on the plus 3 recently because it's still an extra computer in your house. But yeah, Alan Sugar just came along and just said, right, that's it. I'm marketing this purely as a games machine.
Yeah.
Hence the fact that I had a built-in cassette recorder.
Aye, he knew exactly. He had the money and he knew exactly what you had to do. Put a decent keyboard, put a tape drive in it, give it a couple of joystick ports. Away you go.
But he gave them Sinclair joystick ports, didn't he?
Aye, which is a bit just a complete off the topic. When I was playing through a game on the Spectrum a couple of weeks ago, what the hell was it? It was by Microgen. You remember the Pajama Rama?
Yeah, Pajama Rama, Herbert's Dummy Run. Everyone's a Wally.
Yeah. Automania. They actually had one of the joystick options as a Microgen joystick. So they
had their own.
They must have brought out their own. I'd never heard of that before. They brought out their own joystick, and it's not even supported in an emulator. But I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. I'm googling that after this.
And did Microgen? I'm sure it was them. Now, we'll touch on Imagine shortly. Microgen, I'm sure we're going to bring out a game that required an extra bit of hardware add-on. Do you remember that?
What? As well as Imagine? Because we're going to talk. If you're going to talk about Imagine, do you mean Bandersnatch?
Well, they had the super games, but no, I'm positive, and maybe somebody can Google that. I'm sure Microgen were going to bring out a game that required an extra bit of hardware.
I didn't know that.
I'm sure it was.
I know they made Battle of the Planets.
I possibly did Imagine. I don't know. Somebody can have a look. But yeah, just Imagine. Dave Lawson, I think it was. He was one of the founders of Imagine Software. He sadly passed away. I think was it about 2 weeks ago. Just 62 years old, not an age at all. I mean, Imagine were one of the early software companies.
They were one of the early superstar, which is part of their downfall, superstar software companies. Or they at least live like them, whether they could support it or not.
The thing is, yeah, they were. They believed the hype. I mean, I think the thing that really set Imagine, or made Imagine stand out from other companies back then, was the phenomenal. I'm saying phenomenal. I should maybe look at it before I come out with words like that. They had really quite impressive artwork for their covers.
Is that where Bob Wakelin started working?
Possibly. Did Bob Wakelin work for? I know Bob Wakelin certainly did the Ocean Software Imagine.
I've got a funny feeling. Oh, am I confusing with when Ocean bought them? Because he definitely did Green Beret and stuff like that. But I don't know. I'm just trying to think. Because when Ocean bought them, Ocean turned them into their arcade release.
It was basically Imagine.
Probably confused with that.
It was Imagine in name only. There were none of the original programmers there. But yeah, and they took out big adverts. I mean, I can always remember the advert. It was like the two super games. What was it called? Bandersnatch and Cyclops.
Yeah, I can remember the advert for that. Isn't it all of them standing in the background?
Yes, they're like that. They're like kind of scratching their head or staring at the screen, trying to figure out how to.
Yeah, what am I going to do if I'm broke?
Did you ever? Well, you've obviously seen the. I was going to say Bedrooms to Billions commercial breaks.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you see the when their marketing manager goes to see the publisher, and he says, "So anyway, how's the game going? Yep, mm-hmm. How much is it going to be? £45. £45?
Yeah. Because amongst other things, like a memory extension, wasn't it a speech module or something as well?
I can't remember.
Even though they already kind of existed, but
then she's like, yeah, but we're going to have an extra piece of hardware, and you're going to get a T-shirt, and you're going to get a baseball cap, and you're going to get this, and you're going to get that. Mm-hmm. He says, so have you got a? Can you let me see it? Well, we've not actually got a working prototype yet.
And then isn't that the one where they when they finally get shut down, they all get locked out of their own office on lunch break?
The guy that's back in the good old days when you could drink and drive. The guys went to the pub for a piss up, and then they came back to work and they couldn't get in. And you see the guy shoving the obviously the sheriff officers, get your foot out the door, mate.
Because they had a motorbike racing team, didn't they? At one point.
I don't know how. If any cleaners from Imagine Software are watching this, can maybe verify this? I mean, I remember hearing apparently like all the staff had Porsches and Ferraris. Somehow I don't think a cleaner would have them, but yeah, I think the true story is meant to be that Eugene Evans even he had a I think it was a Porsche, and he couldn't even drive. But he was like I remember seeing he was in the newspapers and all that at the time. He was like 16 years old or something. But they were quite literally superstars of the day.
Yeah.
And despite being like classed as a sort of AAA listers, there's very few games they actually put out that you would want to play now. And that's been
trying to think of what their early ones were. Were they Arcadia? Or am I thinking of something else?
Arcadia's probably the best. Yeah. What did they have? They had.
What was the one where you were a bird that could turn into a wizard, or vice versa? That was a Jaffa game.
That was actually very good. That was by John Gibson, who was called Grandad, and the reason
I'm confusing it with something else. Then I think
they called him Grandad because he was 30 years old.
Oh my god!
I wish I was bloody 30. Let's have a look. Imagine Software.
Pud.
That was Ocean. And that was Joffa Smith's first. Yeah. Imagine Software. There we go. Let's have a wee look. Games. Excuse me. Interestingly, Arcadia was actually their earliest game.
I can still remember the cover for that.
Yeah. It's kind of got a white spaceship kind of blasting off into. Now, Arcadia was actually written by Dave Lawson, the guy that passed away. There was Wacky Waiters. There was Frantic.
Don't know either of those.
Don't remember. Catch a Snatcher.
Nope.
I'm sure I've seen an adult film called that. Schizoids.
Clearly then, for what my knowledge of Imagine is basically Ocean's Days.
Aye, yeah. You had Adidums, which was like a bear or something.
That rings a bell, yeah.
I'm sure. What's her face? Oh, what was the guy that used to be in the Late Breakfast Show? Smithy or something he was called.
Mike Smith.
Mike Smith. What was his wife called? She was on Saturday Superstore. Sarah Green. Yeah, she reviewed Adidums. I always remember that. She reviewed Adidums and also Bear Bother by John Rittman. Molar Mall, Jumping Jack.
I remember Jumping Jack.
Stonkers, Bewitched, Alchemist. That was one you were thinking of.
That's it, yeah.
Cosmic Cruiser, Pedro.
You would not get away with that now.
Probably not. You wouldn't get away with Schizoid or Catch a Snatcher either, but yeah. I remember actually we were talking about that in was it the podcast when I went my annual trip to Blackpool, and I had about £10. I want to get some software, because this is before you could go into John Menzies and buy games, and I bought an Imagine compilation, and oh my god, yeah, absolute shit. Yeah, but it's ironic, yeah, that Arcadia is probably the only game that was actually all right. Stonkers, that was an early what do you call it, sort of war type game.
That rings a bell.
And that was programmed by John Gibson, the guy with the beard. John Gibson later went on to form what the hell was that game? Had on the C6 with great music. Denton Designs, do you remember them?
Denton Designs were the stuff of gods. Yeah, Great Escape, where time stood still. Gift from the Gods.
Were you a fan of Jet Set Willy at all?
Wasn't it broken?
What was it? What was the bug? There was a bug where you just continually fall down until you lose all your lives.
We went into a certain room, and then I think I don't know if they fixed it or not. I think they passed off as saying, but there's poisonous gas in that room or something. Like, no, your game's broken. Because there was a number, wasn't there? If you collected all the glasses, it would give you a code, and then you'd phone up a number. Well, maybe it was. I don't know, because I'm pretty sure my older brother Jason phoned the number up, but it was too late at that point. But there was definitely a part in it. If you went into it, it would break the game. Because wasn't Jet Set Willy 2 essentially just Jet Set Willy with a little bit extra bolted on either side, and was essentially a bug fix version of the first game?
I'm not too sure.
But anyway, I was a fan of it because of its nightmare-inducing visuals, but I was shit at it.
Did you ever complete it?
No, absolutely not.
How far did you get in Manic Miner, by the way? Did you ever?
I don't know. No more than 5-6 screens in.
Really? Yeah. See, that's
balls hard, that game. I know. Awesome. I've watched people play it where they cake through it and stuff, and it makes me feel very inadequate about my playing skills, but I find it balls hard.
I read an article, or in fact, it was an interview. Apparently, Matthew Smith never got a single penny for Jet Set Willy.
Wow. That's
yeah.
Of course, the legality of such things back then was an entirely different thing, wasn't it? And also, be careful what you sign. But then that was the problem. They were kids, weren't they? Who programmed in their bedrooms. They're not going to have lawyers reading over contracts and stuff like that. If they even got a proper contract, they probably got something scribbled on the back of a napkin.
I suppose back then, if somebody says to you, "I'll give you 500 quid for it," you would bite their hand off. And
yeah, you wouldn't know about, I mean, I know it wasn't written by kids, but if you look at the success of Robocop on the Spectrum, it spent 18 months at number one.
What did, sorry?
Robocop.
Yeah.
18 months at number one at full price. So think of the sales from that. You kid, like you said, when someone offers you £500, you're not going to understand, what this takes off, because obviously, and you wouldn't unnecessarily understand that they've got marketing in advertising magazines and things like this. Yeah, like you said, I'll just have you 500 quid. You wouldn't know that, particularly stuff like that. I mean, what do you reckon Jet Set Willy sold? It must have sold an insane amount, because it was one of those first games that everyone, even people who didn't have a Spectrum and stuff like that, or even play games, would know of Jet Set Willy. Possibly because of the title, but
the funny thing is, I think probably Jet Set Willy is better known than Manic Miner.
Yeah, I would agree on that.
Yeah, I was never a fan of Jet Set Willy, but I do. It's Manic Miner's still one of the 8-bit games that I play, and if I'm ever going to play it, it's always got to be the Spectrum version.
Wasn't that the first Spectrum game with in-game music?
I don't know. I'm trying.
Music might be too strong of a descriptive term for what it is, but
what other Spectrum games had in music?
Well, you got to also remember, like, between 48K and 128K, because
I think things changed. I had a sort of. I was going to say I had a better.
Was the beeper, wasn't it? So I mean, some games had it, but they were the more simple ones and stuff like that. So.
But have you heard? I mean, some of the music that like David Whittaker and whatever managed to get out of that little buzzer was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I remember.
I was just trying to think. There was a way they could do it. I can't explain it. I'm not even going to attempt to explain it. If anyone in the comments knows, but some people came up with some amazing ways you could double the number of sounds you would get by cheating it. But again, that's what I love about the Spectrum. Work around for everything, including the sound. I mean, what was he thinking though, putting that in it? I guess he was thinking it was a business machine. What would you want from a business machine? Just a beep every time you hit a key.
Yeah. Again, that was when I first saw my mate's Spectrum. You know, I don't admit it. I literally laughed. It's like, listen to this sound. It's just like a little.
Well, you would have come from the glorious SID chip.
Well, yeah. I mean, even though that at that point I didn't, you know, the SID chip, the sound effects and the music in the early 64 games were shite. But the fact that it came out my TV, whereas this thing, it came out this little.
See, we had a workaround for that as well. You'd put out the ear. I can't remember which one you pulled out, either the ear or the mic on the cassette recorder, and then you'd press play, and it would come out the speaker on the cassette recorder.
Ah, so you got the.
I don't know how we found that out.
You were using that as a kind of amp.
Yeah, it still didn't improve the actual sound capabilities. It just meant you could hear it.
Like here's a thing that I've been asked before. If you were to build the ultimate 8-bit machine, what bits would you use? Like the keyboard from the BBC and the sound chip from the C64, right? Keyboard. What would your keyboard be? What machine do you think?
I'd go for the Amstrad keyboard. I'd go for a CPC keyboard.
I take it you've never tried an original Atari 800 keyboard.
No.
No, that's a thing of beauty. Yeah. It's like the old style PC keyboards, really clicky.
Oh, it's got springy clicks.
Aye.
Well, so I've never tried it, but if it's got springy clicks, I'm sold.
Yeah. Well, we'll go for the Amstrad sound chip.
SID chip. Or maybe a Spectrum guy, but even I can admit SID chip.
Color palette.
Can't really go with the Spectrum on that, can we? As much as I love the Spectrum, because attribute, and I'm a fan of it because it's what I grew up with, because of attribute clash and stuff like. Although the thing is, what I will say about the Commodore 64 color palette is, when I've been doing a lot of these comparison videos and a lot of the games I've been playing, like I played Swiv on it the other day, which, don't get me wrong, is fantastic, and in my video I admitted it was better than the Spectrum version. And then I played Critical Mass on the Commodore, and I came to the conclusion, which is a lot of the Commodore games do like their brown colours, don't they?
I knew you were going to say that.
Plus also Critical Mass.
That's a terrible game, isn't it?
I remember it being brilliant when I was a kid. Even Commando, which is great, don't get me wrong, Commodore version of Commando is great, but even that's got its moments of brown tone.
Well, to be fair, it is a World War II emulator, so
yeah,
there's a lot of dirt.
Could have put some blood in there then.
Anyway, avoiding the question, colour palette.
I can honestly say I'd go for the Amstrad, actually, for that colour palette. When it uses its full colour mode, I would say of all the 8-bits, it had the best, brightest colours.
Aye, yeah, I would agree with that. I mean,
Chase HQ on the Amstrad is a thing of beauty.
Yeah, the Amstrad, when done properly, is a stunning looking thing, and and that's even the Spectrum as well. The games were very, very vibrant, whereas the I was going to say the vibracity. That's not a word. The extent of vibrant on the C64 wasn't. It was quite a dull looking kind of computer. It wasn't as bright. But yeah, the Amstrad does have a lovely. You look at something like not Target Renegade. You look at the original Renegade, or what's the other one? Is it Midnight Resistance? I think.
Midnight Resistance, yeah.
Yeah, and it actually used the colours for like shading sort of thing, whereas the C64 was just, and the Spectrum was just different colours. But the Atari does have a really nice colour palette as well.
I'll have to look up an overview of that one. Do you say the Atari 800?
The Atari 800, yeah, all the Ataris had really, I can't remember offhand, maybe it had like a couple of hundred colours or something. But
is the 800 what the 5200 was based on.
Yes, the 5200 is basically the console of the Atari 800. It became the Atari 800, then it became the Atari XL, and then it became the Atari 65XE. But yeah, it had a lovely thing. What about the? I know what you're going to say here. If you had to pick a catalogue of games, what machine would you want?
Spectrum.
The Spectrum, yeah.
Got 22,000. Can't knock them apples.
You know what's interesting? I mean, if I was to say memory, what memory would you want it to have?
128. But when it comes to when it comes to memory, aren't they all reasonably comparable once you hit the 128? It was the storage device that ultimately was how quickly it would load. It all went into the memory across all machines. Is my understanding. I don't know. Pretty much the same. I don't know. That's an interesting one. I probably need to know a little bit more about that. But
you know, what's interesting? Every one of your answers, apart from the games, you've not picked. None of them has been the Spectrum, and yet the Spectrum was the biggest selling computer in the UK, and it was so popular.
But that comes back to what we said, though, doesn't it? It was affordability.
Yeah, it didn't excel at anything, but what it did collectively was absolutely fantastic. And I think
that's a T-shirt in there, right there.
And that's why. Yeah, just prepare for all the number of T-shirts with Sir Clive. That's definitely going to be a thing, I think. What was I going to say? So, how do you think what led to the eventual demise of Sinclair, or not Sinclair? Sorry, it became the Amstrad. We had the. Oh no, so it didn't become. What did he still sell it as the? What was it called when
it was still called a Sinclair?
So was it called the Sinclair Spectrum then? Yeah,
it still had Sinclair branding on it.
Ah, right. It still had a little rainbow.
I guess if he slapped Amstrad on it, it would have been a bridge too far. And do you know what? Like,
that'd have been
also it would have confused with his own branding, which he was still selling.
Yeah, that would have been a bit of a kick in the balls, I think. I mean,
I think his idea was I may as well buy the competition because it's going to sell anyway. So he's not really competing with himself because certain people would buy his anyway. Certain people would still buy Spectrums anyway. So why not have them in your own camp? And it worked. It proved it was fine. But then let's be honest, Alan Sugar had his own Sir Clive moment, didn't he? The GX 4000. Don't get me wrong, I love one. And I'm not rubbishing the actual hardware itself, but the point of launch and with how expensive the games were, was many just being, you could buy them on tape anyway for the CPCs, you know. He had his moment.
And of course, Alan Sugar had the, what was it? Was it like the fax machine or something? I think it was.
Oh, didn't he have that stupid phone thing with a screen on it, which you could send texts on?
So we had the grey. What was it called? The plus two.
Plus two. There were two plus twos. There was a grey and there was a black. I think the black fixed some of the compatibility issues, but it still had compatibility issues.
I think I've owned both of them. I think the grey one is meant to be more compatible, actually. I think.
So that one came first. So what does the black one actually fix?
I don't know if anyone can tell us. And then, of course, you got the plus 3, which was the disc drive version. I always quite fancied getting one of these. But how much were the games?
$14.99 on disc. But there was a fantastic workaround for the games. I mentioned it in my video I did a couple of weeks ago on nostalgic memories of a plus 3. We had a multi-face. Do you remember multi-faces?
Mm-hmm.
Slapped that in the back, bought a pack of discs from Boots, blank discs, and I put games on. So you would load it in a cassette, any 128K game you had, and then you just press the red button, back it up to disc. You needed the multi-face plugged in to use it, but you had one anyway. But I then started just using the multi-face and the disc as a save state device to crawl through games that were incredibly hard.
Oh, right, yeah.
But yeah, that's what happened with us. So the only plus 3 games we had on disc are the ones that came with it, and the rest we just went through because we had a 48 before that. I was in Master System at one point Mega Drive territory for a bit, way out, a year or so after, maybe 18 months after we got our plus 3. But as I said, it still had a machine in the house, and I was still a player. But the great thing about it was almost like Xbox One X. bit of a stretch, bear with me, people, which you would go through all these games that you knew that even though you had the 48K version, the 1 to 8K version was on the other side. So you could then suddenly play the game again and experience it with, larger levels, no multi-loading, better music, period. So we'd load in all the 1 to 8K versions and just multi-face them, so you get like 9 on a disc and stuff like that. So that's where our disc library came from. And also it had really cool double-sided discs. They was the same disc as the Amstrad CPC 1 to 8, and they were really, really good discs.
Were they kind of hard plastic, were they?
Yeah.
Aye.
I think they were 3. Were they 3-inch?
What's that?
I think they were 3-inch.
I remember, just talking about Amstrad, I remember my dad's very first computer it had its own built-in screen, but it was a green screen, and it was
a word processor machine, wasn't it?
Aye, but I bought Starglider for it. It had a cracking version of Starglider.
Was it Starglider on it?
Starglider was on it. And it actually looked really nice because it kind of looked, it almost had the kind of luminosity. There's another word I've just made up of vector graphics. It looked actually really, really nice. I wonder if there's an emulator for that. There again, the only 2 games you're going to get is Starglider and the word processor. So
yeah, they were what we did our typing on at school, because RSA and RSA level 2 typing.
Oh my God, RSA! That's just brought bloody memories flooding back. RSA, what did that stand for? Repetitive strain, something. I don't know.
Repetitive strain asshole.
Well, that's something else entirely different anyway. RSA.
It must have stood something, surely. Royal, I don't know, because everything was royalty based in this country, wasn't it? At some point. All
I can remember is it was colour based, and the one that always jumps out is tan. Tan was one of the colours, and I don't know, was it the darker colours was the more difficult they were or something?
Yeah.
You remember that? You had...
Wow, flashback right there to the very early 90s in my case.
That was still a thing.
Is that even... Yeah, I was just going to say.
90s,
that's
seriously?
when I did it. Yeah. We're talking 91, 92, 93 would have been when I did it. I'm assuming it's not a standard anymore.
Bloody hell, I thought I'd been on computer, but I didn't realise it. I mean, back in the good old days, it was a big box, and it was just cardboard like things you lifted up, and you had to read the book and then answer the questions. Bloody hell. Anyway, how do we get on? What are you talking about RSA for? What were we?
Because you were talking about Amstrad and word processing.
Oh yeah. So see, obviously, what? So when did the Plus 3 come out, and when did it?
87.
87, and was that the last machine? So that was the last machine until it eventually kind of died.
But somewhere along the line, there was a 16-bit Spectrum, and it would have been an Amstrad machine, I think.
What was that? Sorry, Dave. What was that last bit you said?
There would have been a 16-bit Spectrum, and it was an Amstrad machine. And I don't know what that was marketed at. I remember seeing a double-page spread on it in your Sinclair, and even they said, yeah, this is 16-bit, but it's not going to compete with your Amigas or your Atari STs. I can't get, did it not sell? Did they not finally get out with something? Because I never hear anything about that now. Maybe that's another example of one that they previewed and it never got released. If anyone knows that, because that must be worth a fortune if it exists, or if it made it past prototyping. But I definitely remember it being featured in a double-page spread, had a mouse and everything.
Was the QL not a 16-bit? That was touted as being a 16-bit machine, wasn't it?
But this was like a proper could if it wanted to play games. I don't know if the QL could. Have a look. Have a quick Google. Type in Amstrad 16-bit Spectrum.
Give that a go. What was that again? Amstrad. What did you
Spectrum.
Say? I also can bloody spell Amstrad 16-bit Spectrum. Then of course there was the. That's not.
Maybe it never made it past. Maybe it was intended to, but obviously by the time that was coming out, then we're in console territory. So, like I said, it was in your Sinclair, so maybe it was a double-page spread and it was like supposed to, but never actually made it. I do remember seeing the pages on it, and it was a black machine as well.
Yeah, I don't know. There's different. I mean, there was different unofficial ones, and of course you had the Sam Coupe. Have you heard of the Sam Coupe?
That goes for fucking insane money now.
Really?
Yeah, because there's so few of them made. But that was didn't have 512K of memory. Had its own mode. Had a mode where you could improve Spectrum games. That had a disk drive as well. Very odd looking machine though.
I think it was. I think it would almost say it's kind of like where the Spectrum Next.
Yeah,
It's kind of filled it. So yeah, I mean, so I'm just laughing. Ian Hunter's made a wee comment there. He's missed the sexy biscuit. Yeah. So the plus 3 came out in '87, you said, and the Spectrum kind of ceased to be. I think probably because
when you think about it, though, it still had 3 years of good sales in it.
Yeah.
87 would have been RoboCop. 89 would have been Batman. You know, those two huge games like that. So yeah, between 87 and 1990, they still would have made some money off that. I would have thought.
So what do you think led to the demise of the Spectrum?
Consoles.
Yeah. I think that's fair to say. You know,
I mean, even though obviously the games were so expensive on consoles, at some point, I guess when the Mega Drive came out and the Master System got, you know, reduced considerably, at some point you could only look at those games and you couldn't go back to Spectrums, could you, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had a Mega Drive in very, very early 1989 because I imported it. So, you know, and the Spectrum was still around then. I had a Master System in '86. I mean, I still played the Spectrum because we still had one in the house. It was the family computer. My brothers played it, but I obviously was a massive Sega fanboy from the arcades. But yeah, definitely consoles that, you know.
They were just like night and day. I mean, I would imagine that back in '92, people weren't really selling the Spectrum because who realistically was going to buy a Spectrum, because you're effectively buying a machine that, let's be honest, it looks completely outdated as to what you can walk into John Menzies and see, you know, whatever it is. I was going to say Altered Beast on the Mega Drive. That's probably a bad example, but you know, it just looks shite. And plus the fact that you're buying a system that is redundant. So, do you reckon a lot of Spectrums were probably put into the bucket?
I would. It pains me to say this, but well, I don't know. Probably. But also, I think a great many were probably, you know, put into the loft, but sadly never came out.
It's funny how people do that. Rather than throw it, you put it in the loft. for what reason?
With no silicone gel in it, which is, for all intents and purposes, is the same as bin in it.
You see, if Clive Sinclair or Sir Clive Sinclair, if he had the money and, you know, he'd never sold up to Amstrad and he was still around now and making machines, what do you think he could have? Do you think he could have potentially released like the Spectrum, a console, a machine to rival like the PlayStation? Do you think that would have been?
I think the problem would have been he never wanted a games machine.
Yeah.
I think if he never made his car, you know, obviously bolstered his business up and sold out to, you know, Amstrad. I just, even if he got, like, you know, his production in order so it matched his vision, you know, I just think he would have still been obsessed with business. Maybe he would have got what he wanted, and maybe there would be Sinclair PCs and stuff like that. But I don't think, because he always slightly resented, didn't he? Well, always greatly resented the fact that it was a games machine. I don't know if he... Well, you don't know, because obviously it would be an alternate timeline. But would he have ever just truly said, fuck it? You know what? This is the most popular games machine in this country. Let's rule the games industry and go for it. I don't know. I think he would have just still been, I'm determined, maybe because of the failed, you know, QL and stuff like that. No, I'm determined to get this where I will rule the, you know, the working business computer. I still think he probably would have been around in some form or other in electronics, definitely.
Mm-hmm. It always saddens me.
Build a time machine, go back, just have a quick. So Clive, about this car you want to build. There's a couple of magazines from the future and a VHS tape you might want to watch.
It always. I was watching. I don't want to give him a plug. I was watching a video of a certain YouTuber, and he was basically talking about how many people have owned the Commodore brand, to the point that like a couple of years ago they brought out the Commodore smartphone, and it's basically the
I
cheap.
watched a video on that the other day.
Yeah, yeah. And
That's all kinds of crafty shit.
I mean, it kind of saddens me that, and it's a bit like, I suppose, Atari label to a certain degree as well. It's just a name; it doesn't stand for anything at all. And I mean, Commodore, it was bought with Tulip, and it's gone around all the houses. And of course, you had they brought out a Commodore smartphone, and it was basically the cheapest mobile phone you could
Rebranded,
get.
wasn't it?
And all they did was put a wallpaper with the Commodore logo on it, and
banged an emulator on there. That wasn't even their emulator.
And of course, you get the same with Sinclair. I mean, we had the what the hell was it called?
Vega.
The Vega. Yeah, you bought one.
The first Vega, yeah, it's really good. The first Vega
is it worth picking up?
Yeah.
Even with the huge big cable.
I mean, it's endorsed by Sir Clive and everything. The box is done in the style of the first one. It's got limitations. It's got the same limitations, to be fair, as the C64 Mini, which is you've got a virtual keyboard, so you're not going to play adventure games on it. But that aside, it's a joystick. It's like literally plugging it. It's really, really good. It's the travesty of the second one.
Aye. Yeah, there's something like.
Which I think Guru Larry demonstrated you could use to cut cheese. It was so sharply made.
Yeah, I mean, I think, was it something like, it was almost like £500,000 disappeared there.
Yeah, went walkies and stuff.
I remember watching
the build quality at the end was clearly one of those units that lots of people do this, don't they? Which is, you can keep your. Is it? I forget which platform they did it on when it comes to crowdfunding, but is it Indiegogo? Which is, you can keep your money as long as you get a certain number of products out. Whether that product is a true reflection of what was sold in the first place is something entirely different, which is a shame, because initially it was, good intention, and it was supposed to be, and then obviously things just happen. People start dipping into funds and stuff like that, allegedly. But on paper, if they delivered what they said they were originally going to deliver, it would have been really cool. And now obviously it's a collector's item for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, how many actually got
not
released?
Many. And also things like, I had the D-pad so shallow and sunken into it that you like.
But I remember watching the Indiegogo video promoting this thing, and it had an interview with Sir Clive Sinclair, but it was obvious that the guy wasn't even in the same room as him. And I think they just used some stock footage of Sir Clive.
I wouldn't be surprised. He was well, he did pull his name, didn't he? He did retract his name and said they're not allowed to use it on the Vega Plus, didn't he? Because
is that right?
Yeah, because of all the shit and shenanigans that were going on.
That's unfortunate. But obviously, fast forward into where are we now, 2021, the Spectrum will forever live on. There's games. There's probably more games coming out for the Spectrum and Commodore 64 than there were back in '92, whatever it was. Why do you think these machines still have a lot of popularity?
I think it's because of the age of the people who make the games now were, the age with children when they got it. Whether they had the tools or not to do it back then, maybe not. But I think it's just such love of your first computer, really. And also, a lot of these stuff that they're producing now is incredibly impressive.
Amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
And the fact that you can obviously they sell them so you can buy them digitally for emulators, but the fact that they're banging out cassettes with them on as well, that in itself is so people are still loading up, Spectrum games off its original formats, storage device. That's insane.
But it just goes to show that a good computer is a good computer. It is all about the games. It's always all about the games. But obviously, if the love for the Spectrum and the desire to see a new Spectrum eventually came out in the shape of the Spectrum Next, which I've got sitting over there. Have you got a Spectrum Next by any chance?
I haven't.
Yeah.
It is on my list of stuff to get eventually. It's just, I say that, I go, oh, it's a bit too expensive, and here I am sat next to an Oculus Quest 2. So it's I find that I'm like, oh, I can't justify it. Oh, I'll buy a Series S. I can't justify. I'll buy an Oculus. I should just suck it up and get one, shouldn't I?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know,
it's done 2 crowdfunds, hasn't it? So
well, I got mine in
mean,
the original one. Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know if the second one's actually come out yet.
Does it ever go to, like, even if it's in limited run, but does it ever go to a production run outside of crowdfunding?
I'm not too sure. I don't know if anyone knows that. But yeah, I think you know, there's a massive fan base for the Spectrum. The love for the system is huge, and it's that love that has basically made something like the Spectrum Next come to fruition. It's basically, it's like if Sir Clive Sinclair was putting out a Spectrum now, that's what it would look like, and I think it's bloody awesome. I mean, when I did an unboxing of that, and it was a phenomenal feeling actually opening up an original computer, because after the last computer I bought was the Commodore Amiga, and it was awesome to see this brand new thing. It's a beautiful thing. So yeah, but I don't think it wasn't sold as a Sinclair, was it? The Spectrum Next.
I don't think so. But does it does have a rainbow on it, doesn't it? Or
it does. It does. Has it? I think.
Or is it not have a rainbow and they've coloured the buttons on the side or something in that sequence?
Wait a minute. I've got one about 5 feet away. 2 seconds. I thought I'd kicked the bloody mic. I thought I'd kicked my headphone jack out the computer. You behave yourself. No, it doesn't. There we go. Hopefully you can see that.
Oh no, it's got those 3. It's got the stripes on the right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which are a nod to the rainbow.
It is nice though. I mean,
yeah.
A lovely keyboard. I think that's kind of. It does have the look of the toast rack.
That's what they've gone for with those marks, haven't they? Clearly, and the fact that it's elongated on that side, I like that because the toast rack's a gorgeous looking machine.
Yeah, it is nice, and it is.
Cool. The thing is, though, if you made a new Spectrum and you shaped it like the Amstrad, people would be pissed, though, wouldn't they?
I remember when, just going back a wee bit, when I saw, what was it, in Computer and Video Games, you saw a picture of Alan Sugar shaking hands with Sir Clive Sinclair, basically saying how they agreed a deal. And even though I was a C64 guy, I felt quite sad actually that he'd basically succumbed to the dark side, and he'd have to kind of give up.
Yeah, I mean, you can just see that. You can just see him sucking it over his gums, can't you? In that picture there, when he's shaking hands and like, like you said, though, very sad.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a sad day for. But you know what I'm saying? It's a sad day for the computer industry. I mean, I think we've already touched on it. If it wasn't for Sir Clive Sinclair and his mental kind of ideas, you and I probably wouldn't be sitting having this conversation online. And you know,
I wonder if gaming on YouTube in this country would even be as large as it is now.
Yeah,
the many implications of you know, if there was no Spectrum is huge if you think about it. How expensive would consoles be? Would gaming even be as ingrained into people as it is? Because, or would it still be the preserve of the arcades? Because there was nothing at home as cheap to allow, you know, not particularly wealthy people to experience it. It does make you wonder.
You take the Spectrum out. If the Spectrum had never existed, how would 1980s computers look? It would probably still been. It would have just been for people with money.
Yeah, because you know, obviously you still had the Commodore 64, but certainly, you know, most of the people I knew had a Spectrum back then. You know, families weren't wealthy enough to have a Commodore 64. To say it's an alternative 1985 timeline, I would like to see. I'm very glad it didn't come to fruition, but it would be a curious one to see.
No, definitely. So, anyway, listen, guys, I think we've probably kind of talked enough. So, yeah, it's been a good chat as always, Dave. Thanks for taking part.
So, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, no, good stuff. And listen, thanks for everyone that's tuned in tonight. Next Sunday, this Sunday coming will be a Spectrum Sunday live stream. Spectrum games. It's going to be all your favourites, your Chucky Eggs, your Manic Miners, and your bloody Night Lords as well. And Robocop. I will play Robocop. Yep, somebody remind me to do that. So, yeah, listen, thanks, Dave. Dave and I will be back. When did we say? Probably about 3 weeks' time for part two. Part two of our, I can't even remember the bloody name of it. What was it called
before the NES?
That's the one. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, we'll be basically talking about part two. So, anyway, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe until next time. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers, Dave. See you, buddy.